How did developing nations influence the Bretton Woods system? Imagine a world just emerging from a devastating war, where countries are trying to rebuild and find stability. Now picture developing nations stepping into the scene, eager to shape the rules of the global economy. They didn't just sit back and watch. They pushed hard for change. When the Bretton Woods Conference took place in 1944, most decisions reflected the interests of the big powers like the United States and Britain. But developing countries wanted a voice too. They demanded fairer access to international capital and recognition of their unique growth paths. These nations argued that the system should support their efforts to modernize and develop, not just serve the interests of wealthy countries. Initially, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were set up to stabilize currencies and rebuild economies after the war. But these institutions mainly favored the economic models of the richer nations. Developing countries found themselves with limited influence and often faced conditions that didn't match their needs. They borrowed money to fund projects, but many faced high interest rates and strict rules that made growth difficult. This led to frustrations and calls for reform. During the 1960s and 70s, many developing nations pushed for a new international economic order. They wanted fairer trade terms, better access to loans, and respect for their own development strategies. These countries also experienced the pain of debt burdens and conditional loans. Many borrowed heavily from the IMF and the World Bank, only to find themselves stuck with debt and policies that favored free market principles. This pushed the creation of programs like the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, which aimed to reduce debt and give these nations a better chance to grow. Over time, developing nations gained more influence by demanding reforms in how the IMF and the World Bank operated. They pushed for more voting power and representation, especially as emerging economies like Brazil, India, and China grew stronger. The rise of new institutions led by developing countries, such as the New Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, also shows how these nations sought alternatives to traditional Bretton Woods institutions. These banks focus on infrastructure, climate projects, and private sector growth, aligning more closely with their development needs. All these efforts have helped shift the global economic system to be more inclusive. Developing nations have played a key role in pushing for reforms that make the system more fair and responsive. Their influence has helped transform the Bretton Woods system from a rigid post-war framework into a more flexible and diverse set of institutions. In the end, developing nations have shaped the evolution of the Bretton Woods system by demanding fairer access to capital, greater representation, and recognition of their development goals. Their persistent efforts have led to reforms that support their growth within the global capitalist economy. This ongoing influence continues to shape how the world's financial system works today.